I had some troubles to upload it here. Perfect. Okay. I see some answers. Okay. Yeah. It seems to be okay. One important information, I've also set up recording of this presentation, so there should be a movie after finishing our presentation. Yeah, so you're gonna have the opportunity to watch it later on and to repeat it if you had some troubles. So what's the program for today? Today's task is to finish the part about the external strategic analysis and to do 2 tasks about this. I hope that all of you already read my email from today morning. What are the requirements and what are the tasks? So it would be not, it would be not difficult or complicated. And also, it seems to be quite contributive for your final presentation, you know, the group presentation about the application of the strategic analysis for a selected company. Yeah. Just to remind what we did 2 weeks ago, just a brief reminder. Yeah, so if you remember, we tried to practice the brainstorming and especially the brainwriting. So I hope you remember the 6, 3, and 5 method. 6 participants has to write down 3 ideas within 5 minutes. Then we use it in the next task. The next task was the scenario planning. Yeah, so we try to develop a different kind of scenarios for a company working in the area of the meat production. If you remember, we try to assess the risks and the possibilities of doing the business in a slaughterhouse or in a butchery shop. So that was the task we did 2 weeks ago on Tuesday afternoon. That was this in-group task, yeah, on the scenario planning. You were quite good at this, and we finished the previous class. What I shown you, how is the main principle of the focus group method. Yeah, so people sitting in around at the table, typically a group of up to 10 people, and it's important to use this method if we would like to obtain the motivation and attitudes of customers or general consumers. But this method is also used to interview experts about their opinions and about their decisions on some issues. Yeah. So that was just more, let's say, soft method. And what we have to do today is the PESTEL analysis and Porter 5 forces, and finally the Delta Hex model. Yeah. So I hope it's gonna be quite fast today, but I'm gonna provide you also some information about your task that you should do on individual way, and you have to upload them into the submission file. You know, so first starting with the PESTEL analysis. I hope that everybody of you already heard about this method. This is also an example of method from the external analysis because it describes and evaluates the external environment. Sometimes it's called a remote environment in the company. I hope again that all of you understand that the parts of the PESTEL analysis are the political, environmental, legal, technical and technological, economic and social factors. Sometimes it's also known under the name STEPL or steeple analysis, so it's generally the same one. If speaking about the political factors, environmental, legal, technological, economic, and social, let's do a small exercise. Could you type me, all of you, to the conversation one example of some political factor that could be relevant for the university? Yeah, imagine that we would like to do this PESTEL analysis for the university. So could you write me then one political factor that seems to be relevant for the external analysis of the university? Please type it in the conversation. And those of you who are typing here will obtain a points for the activity for today. So one example of a political factor when analyzing the external environment of the university. So Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm checking your answers. Mm-hmm. Perfect stability. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you your ideas, and we're gonna evaluate them one by one. Okay, I see that almost all of you who participate in today provide me some answer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's scroll up on my page. Let's scroll up. Mm-hmm. So some of you mentioned, I see that Janita, for instance, mentioned that the governmental regulation were well. Yeah, the governmental regulation typically it's an important factor. It's an important factor that's a part of the political environment. Yeah. Next, I see that some of you mentioned the stability. Yeah. So stability, it depends what kind of stability are we talking about. If you mean the political stability, yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if the election are on regular way, if there are no big demonstrations, no big changes of the forces in the political situation, and so on. So that's absolutely right. What about some other answers? Okay. What about some? Mm-hmm. New elections are coming up, legislation generally, yeah. So how is the level of the legislation and legal issues in the country? Yeah, tuition guidelines. Good comment, because you know in different countries the education system is different, and typically it's set by the politicians. Yeah, so different strategies. Somewhere it's you know more oriented on the individual performance and on the individual payment, and in other countries is more social oriented. Yeah, so the community and no direct payment is expected. Yeah, the data protection, influence from NGOs, unions, or other external bodies. It's also the external political factor. Okay, government regulations, budget of the year on education. Take care. This is more the economic factor. Yeah, more the economic one. How is the budgeting and how is the fiscal policy? Okay, fine. So we went through all of these cases. Fine. Okay. Let's take a let's speak for a while about the environmental. Yeah. So the environmental factors. Let's switch the industry and let's take a look on the public transportation. Yeah. So what could be the environmental factors for the company who is providing a public transportation in some city? Yeah. You can use the example from your home country or from the Central Europe. It's really up to you. So what could be the environmental factor in the company that's providing the public transportation in the cities? Mm-hmm. So the reduction of green space, climate change, worldwide generally, emissions regulations, you know, it seems to be very important nowadays, typically in Western European cities, where the emission production is really tough theme. Mm-hmm. Okay, so carbon dioxide emission regulations, okay, carbon emissions and taxes, more about the carbon dioxide, okay, road infrastructure. You know, take care. The road infrastructure is more connected with the technical and technological. Yeah, it's not connected with the environment. Carbon tax. Mm-hmm. Some carbon tax is somewhere between the economic and environmental. But for instance, the emission allowance. If you know what's the emission allowance, it's typically the payment if you pollute more than is allowed. Yeah. Carbon dioxide emissions, weather, if it's raining and snowing, that's absolutely right. Yeah. So the weather also play an important role. Typically, in case, how is the equipment of the coaches, for instance, of the buses? Yeah, somewhere the The air condition seems to be quite important and quite contributive, somewhere else not. Perfect. Okay. Thanks out for your requests, for your answers. And let's take a look about the legal factors. Legal factors. Let's switch again to industry. Let's speak about the legal factors. Legal factors in the area of I don't know, the automotive industry, the legal factors when producing cars. Legal factors when producing cars. So what about the legal factors in the automotive industry? Employment regulation. What is it, employment regulation? If you could be more specified, who wrote it? Tomasz. If you could be more specified, what do you understand under the employment regulation? Okay. Consumer protection, you know, it seems to be quite important theme nowadays because the safety is very important part. The same, it don't have to be only the active safety, but also the passive safety. How to protect some possible crashes with pedestrians and so on. Okay. Employee protection. Tomasz told me that this is wages, office hours, taxes. Yeah. Generally, the shift planning. Maybe you know that in the Czech Republic is allowed to have 12 hours shift. Yeah. But this is not allowed in Germany or in Austria, for instance. Yeah. So in some countries, the employment regulation could be much easier or much less complicated than in others. Immigration regulations, you mean the immigrants like workers, like manufacturing workers? Could be. Okay, what else is on a list? New legislation, generally legislation to switch to alternative energy. I think that's a big issue nowadays. Yeah, if gonna be the electricity, if gonna be the hydrogen cars or gas cars, something else. Supplier contracts. You mean, okay? How, for instance, if are there some penalties or bans in a supplier's contracts? That's for sure the legal factor. So generally, the legal environment in the country. Safety regulation. You know that what are the requirements for a safety here in Europe? Not the same one like in India, for instance. You know, where the level of the regulation in terms of safety is much lower. Copyright regulations very well. It doesn't seem to be such important for cars, but for instance for motorcycles, but for the producers of car parts, I mean the spare parts, yeah, some plastic parts and so on. Here the copyright seems to be also important. Producer protection seems to be nice. Safety regulations. Security, that's absolute right. Patient regulation. Beatrice, yeah. That's the thing you've mentioned also under the copyright regulation. Yeah, so everything what's connected of the protection of brands and patients. Regulation for safety. Okay, yeah, very well. Okay, if speaking about the technological factors, you know, everything what's connected with the equipment that's used in the company, everything what's connected, for instance, with the sharing and protection of the information. Yeah, so the technology factor could be how does the company collect the information from customers and how they handle it then. Everything what's connected about the some machines or manufacturing equipment that they use and so on. If speaking about the technological factors, could you apply this in the case of retail chains, yeah, the grocery stores? What could be the example of the technological factor in case of retail stores, in case of retail chains, grocery stores? What could it be? Logistics development in a country. That's for sure. What is it, Mark? Could you be more specific? What's the logistics development in a country? That's right. But could you provide us some example? Okay. So a part of the logistics development in a country, some of you are you here, Mark? Okay. Yeah. So for instance, yeah, the logistics development could be described by how fast is the delivery of food products from suppliers to customers. Yeah. So generally everything what's connected with the warehouses and storages, everything what's connected with the quality and density of roads, and generally everything what's connected with the connection between the place where is the production and the place of the selling and place of the consumption. Perfect. Advances in technology, generally technological change, that's quite general. Internet connectivity, Sean, okay, very well. Yeah, it's extremely important in case if you would like to distribute your groceries over e-shops. You know, a fast speed internet connection seems to be a very important factor, as well as the density of people that are using the internet on an active way. Social media as a communication channel, level of innovation in a country, you know, that this delivery of groceries online, it comes originally from countries like Japan, South Korea, or USA that are very high developed in terms of innovation. Distribution technology, so everything what's connected with the distribution, what kind of distribution channels could be used, if it's only private selling, if it's distribution over the over some transportation companies and so on. R&D activity, yeah, research and development activity in retailing. That's a question. What could it be, Elizabeth? What could be the example of the research and development activity? Because it seems to be quite interesting. What could be research in this area? New online integration system. That's absolutely right. Self-checkout technology, yeah, automation, generally, for instance, the automated storages and automated warehouses, that's absolutely right. Okay, what's else here? The company software, you know, the software for inventory planning, the software for finalizing the orders, yeah, and setting the orders, new software, innovation in R&D. It's still quite general, but doesn't matter. You know, the innovation in the area of retailing, it could be, for instance, the innovation on systems that prolong the term of consumption. Yeah. So, for instance, the system that keep the fruit and vegetable fresh for a longer time. Yeah. To keeping them in a better temperature, in a better humidity, and so on. Yeah. So the innovation in retailing could be this, for instance, the technology of protection of food, yeah, to have them fresh for a longer time. Yeah, La Poussy, shipment tracking, very well. Okay, and we have last two, the economic factors. Economic factors. Okay, let's practice it in case of what could be the example? Economic factors in terms of what about the fashion industry? The fashion industry, producers of clothes and fashion. What could be the economic factor here? Yeah, the fashion industry. What could it be? Okay, I can see some answers from your side. So quotas. What does it mean? Quotas, Malika? Quotas, what kind of quotas? Okay, increase of taxes, supply and demand on specific market, exchange rates, very well, decrease in demand for fast fashion. You know, that's a trend nowadays. Yes, that's right, yeah. Prices go up for materials and also prices go up for wages. Economic growth in a country, that's for sure. What else is here? Economic downturn causing less salaries in non-necessary items, inflation rate, employment rate, purchasing power of consumers, unemployment rate, unemployment rates, limit how much clothing can be imported from a company. That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Those are these, restriction, like you mentioned, Malika. Okay, interest rates, exchange rates, and level to consume, sustainable fashion. Okay, what else? Yeah, very well. So generally everything what's connected with the economic and financial factors. Yeah, so all of them are absolutely right. Yeah. So if we should sum it up in terms of fashion and in terms of clothes, it could be also the wages and the prices of the resource materials, energy costs. New production methods, economic growth, very well. Yeah, 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 yeah. Perfect. Okay. And what about these social factors? The social factors, that's everything what's connected with the population in the country, with the changes in terms of population, and everything what's connected with the cultural factors. Yeah. So typically, how is the structure of population? What about the demography? If there is some specific culture, and how exactly the culture influence the behavior in the country, in a specific country. So if speaking about the social factors, can we apply it, for instance, for what case could we do? Can we apply it, social factors, for the external analysis of theaters and cinemas? What could be the social factor when doing the external analysis of theaters and cinemas? So the social factors for theater and cinema. Okay, some answers. So just a moment, because I can't see your answers. So I see that Maria mentioned the cultural norms, location, religion, age makeup of population, cultural barriers. Okay, income distribution. It's good question. The income distribution, it's somewhere between of the economic and social factors. Yulia, if you mentioned the Gini coefficient that measures how is the distribution of income in a society, so it's somewhere between, but really good comment. It describes typically how big is the middle class in a society, yeah, and how big is the share of people with the highest incomes and with the lowest incomes. Population demographics, way of living, social perception of its importance, the health condition, customer preference, cultural barriers. What else is on a list? Education level, media, social to pressure, the language, very well, yeah, the language, and also the foreign language understanding if speaking about the cinema. But one quite important thing is missing here. What about the family size? The family size, it seems to be quite an important factor. If you have a big family with many children, you typically, and the children requires to go to cinema more frequently than you're than you are living a single. So the family size and the family structure, yeah, typical and important example of the social factors. So how big is the family? How big is the family, and how big is the family size? So important factor, yeah. Don't forget the family. Okay, so I think as far all of you understand the pesto analysis, uh, finally I'm gonna show you the task for you and trying to explain for you how to do this and how to that. So if you don't have more questions about the pesto analysis, that's nice, and we can switch to the next part. And this is the Porter 5 forces. You know, it's also named as an industrial analysis. What does it mean? I'm gonna explain to you what's the main idea of the method and how could it be used in a practical way. Okay, so the Porter's 5 forces, sometimes called as an industrial analysis. What is it? Yeah, so firstly, we would like to describe 4 forces that influence the company from the external side. Those are the entrants, suppliers, indirect competitors, and buyers. How is it? So imagine that there is a company that uses some inputs. Yeah, the inputs are represented by suppliers and new entrants, and they are producing some outputs. The outputs here goes the competitors and buyers. So what could be the inputs for a company, the suppliers and entrants? What is it? If speaking about suppliers, we are interested about one thing. So the suppliers concentration, that's very important thing. Imagine the situation. If there are two possibilities. One possibility that you have a many different kind of suppliers of your materials, of the services you purchase, of energy and so on. Or on the other hand, you have just one or just a very limited number of suppliers where you can choose the product. Then one question, could you provide me an example of product where the number of suppliers for the company is very limited, where we can choose only from very limited number of suppliers? And on the other hand, what could be the example of the product where the number of suppliers is really big? So think about a typical product where the number of suppliers is really concentrated, not big, and an example of products where the number of suppliers is huge. Okay. So I have to show your conversation. So what about your answers? No? So I see 11 new answers. So what could be the case? Okay, scrolling down. So the technological parts, yeah. Typically, the more is the product complicated, the more is it specific, the lower is the number of suppliers. So the technological parts are generally technologies. You know, the technologies, new machines, new equipment for the factories. Here, the number of the suppliers could be really limited. Still, few suppliers typically on the market. By the way, if speaking about the steel, yeah, or iron generally, this is the case where the inputs for the steel and iron production, that's the same case. Really small number of suppliers of the iron coal, of carbide, and of a black coal, yeah. So steel and steel production, good example, very limited number of suppliers. Public transportation, Malika, if you understand public transportation like a case with a low number of suppliers, that's for sure typically. But of course, there are there are differences. In some countries, there could be some monopoly for one supplier of public transportation. In some countries, it could be with no specific regulation, like UK. Almost open competition of companies doing the services here. Okay, phones. Here the number of suppliers seems to be quite big. Yeah, toothpaste, many suppliers. Typically, the groceries. Yeah, products from drugstores, cosmetics. Here are many suppliers, and there is no problem to change the suppliers. Yeah, oil companies. That's a question. If there are the oil producers, yeah, oil producers, then there is a low number. But if are there the oil distributors, like the petrol stations, here the number of suppliers is typically quite big. Retail, many suppliers, really good number. Yeah, face mask. Now it's important here in Czechia. So here the number of suppliers is low. T-shirt, generally the cloth and fashion, high number of suppliers. Yeah, high amount plastic. Small energy, yeah, so the small number of suppliers. Energy, remember, everything what's connected with the energy, with suppliers of the electric energy, suppliers of gas, fuels. Yeah, so here it's typically limited. The same is if you have some supplier of a of heating and of a warm energy. Yeah, so the same case. Suppliers of steams, for instance, for the industrial companies. Yeah, mobile network, really good example. Typically, we are selecting between low number of suppliers. Yes, yeah, perfect. Okay, pharmaceuticals. Yeah. Okay, that's clear. Perfect. Good ideas. Yeah. And with the number of suppliers is also connected to second factor, and those are the switching cost. How difficult is to switch from one supplier to the another supplier? Yeah, so the switching cost, how costly is to change one supplier to another one? And typically, if you have just limited number of suppliers, if you buy in some energies, some high-tech product and so on, then the switching cost could be really expensive. But if are there grocery stores, some cosmetics, here the switching cost doesn't matter any role. Yeah, the same is for the office equipment. Yeah, different kind of papers, cartridge and so on. Here the switching cost is also low. Substitutes. Yeah, so substitutes is also connected with the previous two factors. So are there some other possible alternative products on the market or not? Yeah, so typically, if there are many suppliers, there is a high probability that different kind of substitutes can occur there. Yeah, and competition, that's very similar to the number of suppliers. Yeah, so how big is the competition? How big is the pressure on prices? Yeah, so if there is a price-sensitive product or not. So this is about the suppliers. Yeah. The second factor, if we go counterclockwise, is are the entrants. Yeah, entrants. It's described like a new companies that are entering the market. Yeah, so new companies that are entering the market, and what's important? Yeah, what are the external factors? So external factors, what are these pesto factors? Yeah, so how significant are the political, environmental, legal, technological, economic, and social factors in a country? So, if the economic situation in a country is low, yeah, then there is a low number of new entrants. But on the other hand, if there is a high-tech country, a high number of entrants can occur. Yeah, so the external factors, it goes there from the pesto analysis. Second is the economics of scale. Yeah, I hope that all of you understand what is it, the economic of scale. And it describes that with the higher number of higher production or higher amount of production, typically the fixed costs are decreasing. Yeah? So the economies of scale, if you produce the higher number of products, the total costs are decreasing. And it's for the purpose that the fixed cost for a higher production are lower, yeah, than for a lower production. You know, the fixed costs, they are still the same. Everything what's connected, for instance, with the equipment of the company, what's connected with some safety, IT services, and so on. So it's stable. But if you produce more product, then it decreases. Yeah, the fixed cost divided by the number of products. That's the thing that we are searching for. Yeah. So the economics of scale. Yeah. If we produce more product, then the total costs are decreasing because the fixed costs are decreasing. By the way, these things, yeah, what's connected with the fixed cost and their influence on the total cost, it's called a contribution margin. Yeah, maybe you have heard it in some other course. Contribution margin. That's the thing that's checked in this case. Fine. The product differentiation, what does it mean? If there are, different kind of varieties of the product, or if the product is produced only in one size, color, material, and so on. So how is the product differentiation on a market? Then the brand value and brand equity. Yeah. So, for some kind of products, the brand value and then brand recognition by the customer seems to be very important. It's typical for luxury products or for a car, for cars, for watches, and so on. Yeah. So for some kind of products, a well-established brand, a traditional brand, luxury brand is much important than for another products. Again, in many examples from the grocery stores for foodstuffs, it doesn't play such important role like for more tangible and more durable products like cars, for instance. Yeah? And what's connected with this is the customer loyalty. Yeah, the customer loyalty. How loyal are the customers to the product, even though the price can increase? Yeah. So if the if customers still buying the product, even though the price is increasing. And then there are two more factors. One are the indirect competitors and buyers. Those are, more factors that influence the output of the company. So the suppliers and entrants, that was on the input. Indirect competitors and buyers, it's more on the output. So indirect competitors, what is it? If there exists some substitutes, and if yes, how is their substitution power in terms of price, in terms of number of substitutes, in terms of switching cost, in terms of easy to switch to change the product, and in terms of availability. Yeah. So typically, if speaking about these cell phones, yeah, mobile phones, so the cell phones, it's an example where the substitution could be quite easy, because there is a high price range from the really low cost cell phones to the almost luxury models, high-tech models, and so on. So the range of price is high. The number of producers and the number of products, I mean the models of the cell phones, is really big. So it's really big. Switching costs are quite low in average because the majority of cell phones are using the most frequent operation systems. Yeah, like the Apple and Android. So to switch from one, I don't know, from Samsung to Apple and so on, it's not difficult. Here the switching costs are quite easy. That it transfer your contacts from one phone to the another phone. It's quite easy. Then the easy to switch. If there are some specific complications, for instance, some long-term contracts, some difficulties, and so on, and availability. Yeah. So if it's easy and available on a market, enough products to switch. So the cell phones could be the example of the substitutes or the product where the substitutes are quite strong. Yeah. So for a cell phones, there is a high level of the indirect competitors. Again, one question: could you provide me an example of a product or service where the substitution power is low For instance, where the price is high, the number of substitutes on a market is low, the switching costs are very high, the easy to switch from one product or service to the another one is difficult, and the availability of free products or generally available products on the market is low. Could you provide me some example of this product where the substitute costs are where the substitution could be quite difficult? So airplanes were a very good example, yeah. A limited number of airplanes producers, typically two companies, you know, the duopoly competition in terms of passenger airplanes, yeah. Ryanair or Flixbus could be some transport, but do you think that, Pedro, do you think that in case of Ryanair, is it also cost, you know, are there high cost to switch from Ryanair to Flixbus? What's your opinion? Is it also, is it really costly or not? Or are there some other possible substitutes to do this or not? Malika, excellent example. Internal company softwares, yeah, a very typical example of a product where the switching from one to another typically takes a lot of time. Yeah, it's very difficult. There are typical long-term contracts, typically for softwares in big companies, corporations, or governments. Okay, shipping company could be, depends on example, different types of water, different types of water. That's a question, Maria. I'm thinking if there is, what does it mean a different type of water? Because, you know, if you go to your tube, there is only the pipe water, yeah. So just normal drinking water from a tape. So nothing more, nothing special. Construction machinery could be Marek, okay. Video games. Mm-hmm. And finally, or not finally, but the fourth one are the buyers. So what about the buyers as a customers, consumers, and industrial buyers? What about the buyers concentration? Again, is there a situation that we have only a small number of customers? So for instance, we are supplying only to 2 or 3 customers, or do we have, you know, thousands or million of the anonymous customers? Yeah. So what kind of business is it? Do we have only a limited number of customers, or do we have thousands or millions of customers? Yeah. Then the switching cost of buyers. What does it mean? Is from the buyer side difficult to switch from one product to the another product? It's similar like for indirect competitors. Yeah. So for the cell phones, it's quite easy. Then the buyer's information. How difficult is for buyers to obtain the information about the products and some possible competing products, or some possible alternatives or substitutes? Yeah. So what about the information of the product? Is it easy to obtain the information about the product, or is it difficult? Then the price sensitivity, yeah. So the price sensitivity, it means if the customers are sensitive to the price changes or not. You know, the examples of the price sensitivity, where the price sensitivity is high, it could be some basic foodstuffs, for instance, yeah. It could be the price sensitivity could be also high for fuels, yeah, some kind of fuels and so on. So typically, the more frequently we buy some product, then the price sensitivity is higher. Rather than some luxury product that we buy just once a year or once a couple of years. And finally, the product uniqueness. What's the USP? Do you know what's the USP? Unique selling proposition. So something what's unique, what's extraordinary for the product. Yeah. So the USP, it could be that the product has a much longer durability than the other products. the USP could be that the product has is produced from some specific material. The USP could be that the perfume has some really specific and extraordinary flavor, yeah, and so on. So those could be the cases. Again, could you provide me an example of industries where the buyer's concentration is very low and where the buyer's concentration is very high? Could everybody provide me an example of one company or industry where the buyer's concentration is very high? So we have, you know, just 3 or 10 buyers where the total production of the company is delivered, and the industry or company that has thousands or million customers that are almost anonymous and not segmented anyway. Yeah. So one example of the company with a high buyer's concentration and one example of company with a low buyer's concentration level. Malaria medicine, very high consumers number. So it could be the case of all medicines and drugs, very well. Okay. High specific chemical products. So for instance, some semi-products, you know, semi-products for further processing in the chemical chemical companies, very well. High household items, high concentration for household items. I think it should be rather, you mean the high concentration or high number of customers? If our high number of customers, yeah, that's right, for household items. High concentration, airplane parts for new planes were well, yeah. Low satellites, high soft drinks could be, yeah. Okay, yes. Yeah, high number of customers for the pen company, yeah. Low concentration of customers, bottled mineral water, yeah. High electronic products. Very well, yeah. So generally, if there is some semi-product for further processing, like these chemicals, it's, you know, specific chemical products, that's a really good example, yeah. Or the same is if there is a company that producing some car parts, yeah, that are made for measure, yeah. So producers of the car parts that are produced only for one car producer and delivered, all production is delivered only to one production plant. Yeah, so it's more typical to have only a limited number of customers on the companies in the B2B market rather than for companies on a B2C market. Excellent. Okay. And what's the final force? The fifth force is the force of this is a force that's called the competitive rivalry. Yeah, competitive rivalry. So if the company has some sustainable competitive advantage through innovations, yeah. So how is the competitive rivalry within the industry? Yeah. So how is the competition within the industry and within the company? It's described how is the level of the advertising expenses. If the company has some powerful competitive strategy, and how is the firm concentration? Yeah. So the competitive rivalry describes the situation if we have more companies that are producing the same products, doing everything the same, but what could be the points of difference? Yeah. So if one innovates more, yeah, the higher is the competitive rivalry. If one invests more for the advertising, if one has a more competitive strategy, for instance, they diversify more the inputs for the company. Yeah, one is more concentrated, another one is has more distributed organization structure. Yeah, so how is the competitive rivalry if we have the same companies, and what's the difference between them? Yeah, that one could pay more for the innovation, one focus more on the advertising expenses, or have more competitive strategy. Yeah, for instance, focusing on some growing segment of customers and so on. Okay, so that was the second part, the Porter's 5 forces. So the Porter's 5 forces. I hope that we don't have a question. If you have some question, so we can answer them later on. to sum it up. And the last part of today's presentation, it's a model that's you know, like a competition to the Porter's five forces. It's called a delta hex model. You know the delta because it's like a triangle, yeah, and it's a model or triangle between three variables. One is the competition, cooperation, and open innovation, and it describes how is the situation on a market. Yeah, so if the company is more oriented on the cooperation and sharing the ideas, innovations, informations with their customers and suppliers, or if the company is more oriented to provide the best value for the customers, yeah, so the best value for the customers, it means if they propose some new innovations, trying to promote the products with new attributes, higher quality, and so on. Or if the company is rather more focused on the total customer solution. So if the company is more oriented on the competition and trying to satisfy the customer the most. Yeah. So this is a similar model like a triangle, and there is typically a measure from 0 to 100 that measures how high is the cooperation in the company, how much is the company cooperative, how much is the company oriented on the competition, so providing the high satisfaction of customers, providing a total customer solution, some additional services, good delivery, and so on. Or if it's oriented more on the innovation, yeah, if it's more innovative oriented. How to understand this model? You know, in an optimal situation, the company has to be in all three lines in the middle. Yeah, so somewhere here, here, and here, so in the middle. But you know, some companies are more oriented on the innovation, even though that the cooperation and the total customer solution could be lower. Yeah, so for instance, the innovation companies are more placed in this side. Yeah, so the Tesla company, it could be the case the company where the best value to the customer, like an innovation, is more important than the cooperation with customers and suppliers. You know, here for Tesla car is not the customer service such good as for you know, the cars that are produced in a higher amounts, but they are really focused on the innovation. On the other hand, yeah, there are companies that are trying to share as much with the customers and suppliers as possible. So they are sharing the ideas, innovations, software, and so on. Yeah, the cooperation, that's the case, for instance, of the IT companies. Yeah, the IT companies has the business model oriented more on the cooperation. And the example of the total customer solution, those could be the companies that are more oriented on the or they are more working on the B2C market, like different kind of e-shops, yeah, because they are more focused on the to increase the customer satisfaction and to have the satisfied customer or a satisfied customer who is also loyal and who purchase on a repeated way. Yeah. So the delta hex model describes how is the approach of the company to the innovation. If it's more oriented on cooperation and sharing the information, knowledge, and ideas with customers and suppliers, or if it's more oriented on the best value to customers, to the open innovations, or if it's more oriented on the competition, to provide a total customer solution for them. Yeah. One more slide. Yeah, that's the comparison between the Porter's five forces. Yeah, and between the delta hex model. One more question: if you see these three letters, HBS and MIT, do you know what is it? Who knows what does it mean? HBS and MIT. Try to write it to me without searching on the internet. Who does it know? Who will be the first one? HBS and MIT. What does it mean, the HBS and MIT? HBS and MIT, what does it mean? HBS on the top and MIT here. What does it mean? What is it? Names of universities, exactly. Yeah, the Harvard Business Schools, Harvard Business School, and the MIT is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yeah, so MIT and HBS, the names of the universities. Perfect. So you know this. And what does it mean? You know, two competing universities, yeah, two competitors, and two different models, yeah, because each university developed its own model, yeah. The Harvard Business Universities developed the Porter's Five Forces model. By the way, if we've already mentioned the name of Michael Porter, yeah, just for information, he is still alive. He is, I think, in the age of 72-year-old. And he's still active, writing the books, doing some lectures, and so on. So the Michael Porter, one of the most important theorists in the area of management in the last 40 years. And the Delta X model comes from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. What's the difference? Yeah, you know, that the HBS model, the Porter's Five Forces model, is oriented on the competitors. You know, how's the situation between the competition, between the competitors on the market, and Delta X model is oriented on the customers. Yeah, so that's the difference. But what's important for us that both, yeah, both Porter's Five Forces model and Helix Delta model are for the analysis of the external environment. One more information for you, yeah, how to use it in practical way. So first, when doing the analysis of some company, typically when writing some bachelor thesis or when you're gonna work for some consultancy company, but also imagine the situation that you are working as a salesperson, some sales manager, and you should visit a new customer, yeah, and typically at first, your notes is to do is with respect to the Porter's Five Forces model. Yeah, so you can ask the company, okay, so what about your suppliers? Do you have many suppliers or just a limited number of suppliers? What's the country of origin of them? How sensitive is to the price, and so on. Next, you can ask, what about some substitutes? What are your competitors on the market? Yeah, who competes you the most? Are there some threats of competitors or not? Yeah. Then you can ask about the number of customers and their structure. Do you sell your products or services on the domestic market and do you export them? How many customers you have? Are there some seasonal customers, or is it the constant number of customers per year? And the threat of new entrants. What are your new competitors? Are there some new competitors from another country, some new startups in our country, and so on? And the competitive rivalry, here could be the question, who is the biggest competitor of you? Who's the biggest competitor? Who does compete your company the most? So that's the also practical implication and the practical example. How could it be used when doing the meeting with the representative of some company and you would like to obtain this information? So these 5 kind of information seems to be the most relevant for you as a salesperson to have the overview about the company. Okay, so that's everything from today's lecture. Once more, we spoke about the pesto analysis. Then we spoke about the Porter's Five Forces, about the entrants, suppliers, indirect competitors, buyers, and competitive rivalry. And finally, about the Hex Delta model. Now there is a space for your questions. Shall I repeat something more detailed once more, slower? So who need to repeat something, just write me a comment. And I'm gonna do this. Or if you have some questions, make sure that all of you understood these 3 types of analysis well, because at least first 2 gonna be a part of your final presentation, about your group presentation. So if you have some questions about the Porter's Five Forces, about the pesto analysis, now you have a space to ask me, to repeat something, to explain something more detailed. Okay, no questions. If no questions, then I'm gonna provide you some information about your tasks. Yeah, I hope that all of you. Pedro is asking, are all of them are for the external analysis? Yes. Yeah, that's this is everything was connected with the external analysis. Yeah, so external analysis of the company. Yeah, that's for sure. External analysis. Yeah. Uh, to do the pesto analysis, it's easy. Yeah. To do the industrial analysis, here you need more information or more detailed information, but it's still quite working well. But for the hex delta model, if you do it, on a general way, you could use the information from the internet about the company. Yeah. So for instance, you can check what's the value for the customer. So what kind of innovations do they developed? Yeah. What's the total solution for customer? That's again, yeah. What's the service provided for customers? Yeah, but typically for the Porter's five forces and Higgs delta model, you need more detailed information if you would like to do it in a really good way. Okay, more questions. I'm trying to open the task and explain you what I expect to do from your side. So yeah, Beatrice is asking, how are we going to do the group presentation if the VSE stays closed longer? I understand that it's a complication, but we will do it in the way that you're gonna do the presentation in a group way, but you would upload it to the ANSYS with no presentation. Yeah, you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah, just only to do the PPT slides, upload it into ANSYS, but without physical presentation. Yeah, I don't want to ask you to, to record some movies or something like this. Yeah, because I understand that you are now in different countries. So only to do the presentation jointly. Yeah, but you're gonna upload it, I'm gonna evaluate it and distribute the points. So the second question is from Yulia's side. Should each of us choose a company, or could we do it in our groups? Again, I would recommend you to do it in your groups. I understand that some of you left the Czech Republic for the rest of the semester, but you can develop a different groups. Yeah, but it has to be still at least the group of 2 or 3 people. Yeah, if you I expect that if you distribute the tasks on 2 halves, so you can do it even in the double. Yeah, so no worries about this. I want to upload one file and then to answer the rest of questions. Where is it? Here is it. Okay, can we choose a company from our country to do the analysis? Is asking Carlos. Yes, of course. It's really up to you what kind of country and what kind of company is it. It could be some international famous company. Yeah, it could be something else. Really up to you. Yeah, it could be domestic company, foreign company. Really up to you. Yeah. About the homework, the homework is due on March 23rd. 12:59 minutes PM. Yeah, it's been written in the email in the morning, and check the submission file. It's closing next Monday at midnight. Just a moment. I need to upload. I need to show you this. I need to show you the task. Just a moment, please. It's not such fast like I expected. What's wrong with this? I don't know why it's blocked now, but let's answer your questions. Yeah, Mark was asking about the troubles with the email, that some of you didn't get the email with the code for the lecture. It's not possible to open. I can tell you one thing, and no, I can tell you one thing, and that's that I've sent it to all of you, to both private and school email. Yeah. So I hope that there could be maybe some trouble with your private emails or with the school box. Yeah. But we had some similar problem with another student yesterday. So today, all of you have received it to your school box, yeah, or school mailbox, and to your private box. So check it. Those of you who didn't receive it, let's write me an email. I'm gonna provide you the code once more. But I understand that there could be some problem, and therefore I've sent it to both your emails. Okay, because it's not possible to open the PDF file here, so I can. I've uploaded to your document file in ANSYS 2 documents. Yeah, one is called CS5. No, one is, where is it? One is called CS3 Apple Porter. Yeah, CS3 Apple Porter. So what is it? That's the application of the Porter analysis on case of company Apple. Yeah. So try to read this task carefully and try to just apply the Porter's 5 forces on the Apple company based on this text. Yeah. So that's a first task for you, to read this and do this. And what's wrong with this? And there is one more task, and this is about the that's about the pestle analysis. That's the application about the pestle analysis for the fast food service. It's called CS2, Pestle and Quick Food Service. Again, it's been uploaded to the document file and the answers, so you can download it, you can read it, and answer the questions. Yeah, I'm just now trying to upload it to your conversation here in Teams to have the same task, and can you see this file? It's been already uploaded. CS3 Apple Porter. That's one task for you, and one more. It's a code pestle analysis for a fast food chain. Yeah. So try to open it, try to check it, and in case of questions, I'm gonna explain what's the task for you. It's quite easy. Your task is to read it carefully, apply the Porter analysis and pestle analysis, and write me the answers to these questions and upload them to the submission file, yeah, in ANSYS. Regarding the questions, this task has to be done individually, yeah. Yeah. So if you have some questions about these two tasks, just let me know, or if you'd like to ask individually, you can write me an email, yeah, or we can make some error calls, yeah. So just read this carefully, yeah, and try to answer the questions to each of these tasks. It's nothing too long. It don't have to be such long, but only to decide, yeah, what could be the, what could be the force of the new entrants in case of Apple. What could be the force of substitutes of what could be competitive rivalry in the industry, and so on. Yeah. And one more thing, those of you, or those, pardon, those of your classmates who didn't receive my email, just write me once more again, yeah, in order to check what could be the mistake and fix it, yeah. But I hope that all of you, or almost all of you who are here present, receive this email also for your private and for your school mailbox. Okay. Now there is a time for the homework, yeah.